Hey, Teddy K here for the Best Buy blog, and in this video review we take a look at the Canon EOS Rebel SL3. This is a digital SLR that is an entry level and a good step up if you want to move up from smartphone or point-and-shoot photography. The Canon Rebel SL3 is very much an entry-level DSLR camera, just like you would expect a Rebel to be, but Canon did add a few things to it to make it a little better than its predecessors. Now, I never tested the SL2, so I can't really compare it to that, but what I can compare it to is various other cameras that I've tried. And certainly for me, being a more seasoned photographer, this is not necessarily what I would choose to shoot with, but if you're not, if you consider yourself a beginner and you just want to try your hand at getting better photos with better equipment, this is a good place to start. The reason why I say that is more so because Canon has tried in a way to address a few different things. Now, one is the size. So the size of the camera itself is still a little bit bigger than the average mirrorless camera, but it's for an SLR, it's not bad. It's a pretty decent size, and the kit lens makes it feel pretty small too. On top of that are all the context that Canon adds to all the settings and features. So when you change settings or you change whatever shooting mode you want, there's always going to be something on the screen to contextually tell you what it is you're doing. In addition to that, I think once you get to learn the buttons, there aren't too many physical buttons, but there are some. And once you get to learn some of those, I think you'll find that navigating the camera and actually navigating some of the features that actually will turn out to be better shots is not that hard to do. I know it's easy for me to say that because I shoot with cameras all the time, but you know, in reality, it actually isn't that hard. And there are a few key things that I would take away here. So first of all, what's good is that there are a number of modes and features that will help you along the way. So for example, the two I think that stand out as a stepping stone would be the scene mode and the creative filter mode. These are highly automated modes that essentially allow you to not really tinker with any settings and just kind of shoot at will. You can adjust the focal point. I'm going to get to that in a second because the way you do it is pretty similar no matter what mode you're shooting in. But the main thing here is that you at least have a means of learning how to shoot a certain way. So for example, scene mode will give you certain scenes. Okay, it's pretty straightforward. Creative filter also is pretty straightforward because again, those are just scenes under a different name, to be honest, but there's a little bit more of an artsy kind of effect that goes into it. Personally, at my level, I wouldn't necessarily shoot in those modes, but you know, I had some fun with them. For me, I prefer going with TV, which is shutter priority, AV, which is aperture priority, or manual. You don't have to worry about those modes if you don't know what they do. And again, I think that's the whole point of this camera. I looked at it almost as if a graduated process within the camera itself. And the touchscreen is very helpful. So you have a 3-inch LCD that I think is very, very helpful when it comes to navigating the interface. Now, just as I look at the specs, I'm going to put up the specs here for a second. Some of these numbers or figures may not mean much if you don't know the camera terminology behind it, but that's okay too. That is all right. You don't have to know everything right away. The 24 megapixel image CMOS sensor plus the Digic 8 image processor do a great job of just capturing photos and processing them in most instances. You're going to have a little bit of trouble in low light and night shots, but that also has something to do with the lens, which the kit lens, the 18 to 55 millimeter that came with the camera, I'm not a big fan of personally, but you know, if you're just starting out, it's going to be fine. And of course, you can use any EF mount Canon lens that you want with the camera after, so if you want to graduate to something better, you can buy a better lens and do that. If you want to do that right away, I certainly would advise that too. If you have the money and you can do it, by all means. So that being said, what's interesting about this now also that you may not realize right away is that you have 9 AF points, 9 autofocus points when you look through the viewfinder. That's not the case if you're using the touchscreen to focus though. So the touchscreen allows you to basically touch anywhere on the screen and focus on that point. So basically you have 9 through the viewfinder and then you have thousands, just under 4,000 when you look at the touchscreen. That's not a knock on the viewfinder because when you're peering through the viewfinder, you don't need as many when you're shooting that way. I'd like to have more, don't get me wrong, but for a lot of shots, you may find that just moving it around in those 9 spots, 9 different points will be enough. One little trick though, if you don't know how to change the focus while you're on the fly, so for example, you know, you're setting up the shoot and there's the button that is basically next to the magnifying button. You press that, and then using the directional pad, you can then adjust where you want the focal point to go. If you're using the touchscreen, so if you're just shooting from, away from the viewfinder, you can just basically touch whatever you want to shoot. And there's even an option to basically make the touch a shutter. So as soon as you touch, it snaps the photo. So I know that I'm going through some of the features here, and it may sound confusing, but this is a camera that I just have to stress. You don't buy this, leave it on scene mode, and just go from there. I think it would benefit you to learn how to use the camera in the other modes to gain better control over how you shoot. Reason being is that you will have better, I think you'll have better control over what kind of shot you're trying to take and what the output's going to be like. So for example, I always shoot in RAW because I want some control over processing the image after. You can shoot in RAW on this camera, certainly. You will not get RAW photos with scene or creative filter mode. Those are only for JPEGs. But if you're shooting with any of the other manual modes, like manual, TV, AV, even program, you can shoot in RAW. Again, that is the graduated process I'm talking about. You may not know what RAW is. You may not know how to use Lightroom. You may not know how to use a program that can handle RAW images. But that's okay. You don't have to know everything right away. And I think that's really what underpins the Rebel line, not just this camera, but the line unto itself. I first used the Rebel camera well over 10 years ago, and at that time it was good for me. It helped me learn, and I think this one would help as well. The quality of the photos, I've run through some photos here as I've been talking in the video, but I think the quality is going to depend on how you shoot. For the most part, it's pretty good, especially if the conditions are optimal. Things will be a little bit more of a struggle when it comes to low light or night photography. If you're using a tripod, that certainly helps. I found shooting in full manual, where I can really control the shutter, the aperture, ISO, and all that could benefit what type of shot I was taking, especially at night. But there are some dedicated night modes that you can use under scene or creative filters. So if you don't know how to do anything manually, try those first and see if you can emulate some of the some of the settings that snap that shot. Some of the metadata, I should say. So photo quality is pretty good. I think with a better lens, I would have gotten far better shots. That's okay. I mean, that's the whole point of SLR photography, is that eventually you do upgrade on lenses as well. And video quality is not bad too. Now, if you're going to shoot in 4K, you can only shoot at 24 frames per second. That's not bad. You're going to get that cinematic look when you do that. If you want to shoot something like faster action, you'll have to drop that down to 1080p, and you can go 30 or 60 frames per second on there. Video quality, again, not bad. I just shot some basic clips and found that one of the things that was beneficial was because of the lightweight of the camera, holding it in place and kind of panning wasn't that difficult to do, and it actually was pretty smooth. So you do get a crop factor, and that's part of the reason why it's smooth, is because you're going to get a narrower angle when it comes to shooting video. But again, that's that is kind of Canon's pedigree when it comes to that. They will create a crop factor for video. It does stabilize the footage a little bit, but it means you get a step further back to get more into the frame. Battery life is something I also want to address too, because I think that's important. Canon rates this at about just under 1,100 shots. Now that's assuming that you're shooting only with the viewfinder. If you're using the screen and you're shooting video and all that stuff, naturally that number is going to change. Needless to say, I don't think you can expect any less than 600 shots per charge in mixed usage. Of course, that number can vary if you're exclusively using the screen, because the screen is ultimately the biggest battery drainer for this thing. So to sum it up, I think the Rebel SL3 is probably one of the best entry-level cameras you can get right now, for SLRs especially. It really kind of helps guide you along, and I think there's an upside too, because of course if you use a better lens, you'll just get even better photos. Are there better cameras? Yeah, of course there are. This is of course not a high-end Canon camera, but that's okay. If you're looking for something higher end, you'd want to get more out of that too, and I think this is almost like a set of training wheels to get to a point like that. So if you're an aspiring photographer, start here and then you can move on up, especially if you use lenses that will work with a better camera later down the line. And that's my review of the Canon EOS Rebel SL3 for the Best Buy blog. I'm Teddy K. Thanks for watching.